What's the best way to get healthy plants and a huge harvest? This year, I've looked at different ways to prune my tomato plants, all the way from one single main stem vine to not pruning at all. And I'm here to tell you the results and rank how many tomatoes I got and how early, how healthy my plants are, and how easy it was to prune. So let's get started and look at my single vine tomatoes. Quick review, indeterminate tomatoes, all of the tomatoes I'm showing you today are indeterminate, are the tomatoes that will keep growing forever until the end of the season in terms of length and in terms of producing your tomatoes. And they'll start off with one stem, but if you leave the suckers alone, then it'll make another stem and another stem and another stem, and it can go like that. So a lot of people will prune their tomatoes down to one stem, or I've done 2 stems, 3 stems, and more, because they may want to try to force an earlier harvest. They may want to crowd more plants together. They may want to make sure that the plants are going to be healthy. They may like to string trellis like I'm doing here. So these are my string trellised tomatoes pruned to a single vine in my little raised bed garden right here. And you can see that as the tomatoes been growing, I've been taking off all of the potential vines through the middle, so that all that we have growing from this vine are the tomato clusters and the sun leaves. And the tomatoes on the bottom are ready sooner than the tomatoes on the top. These are just flowers here. So how had they done? Well, because I have them pruned to a single stem, I have been able to crowd more tomatoes together. And if you have a small space and you don't care so much about getting a large harvest of any one plant, but you want to have a lot of variety of tomatoes, then this could be a really good option. But I have a lot of space and I do want to have kind of a lot of tomatoes per plant if I can. So on this one right here, you can see that I've got 3 tomatoes that are getting nice and juicy and ready down here. Come up, I've got actually a couple little shoots on the side that I'll just pull off as we go. One here and then some flowers, some of which have taken, some that haven't. Up there, some more flowers going. And that's kind of the way that all of these plants have been. I've got somewhere between 5 to 15 tomatoes of this size that are growing per plant. Now, by far, my happiest of the tomato plants in this raised bed garden is my lovely Sun Gold hybrid. So let's go look at that. So my Sun Gold, as you can see, I've got tomato clusters the whole way up. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then some flowers going here. And then this is another plant. I've got 2 plants here if you see these clusters going on. And this plant will keep going up and up and up. And I can, as I've done, crowd a lot of them together. How easy is this? I think it's pretty darn easy to have it grow up the string trellis. It does require at least weekly maintenance, a bit more earlier in the season, a bit less later on, but later in the season you're going to be picking your tomatoes anyway. I would rank it 7 out of 10 for how easy it is. I think my plants look pretty healthy. I've been making sure to prune my lower leaves so that they don't rest on the soil. I've not had too much pest or disease problem this year, so I would rank it as about an 8 out of 10 for how healthy it is. And production is decent. For the space that I have for these plants in this part of the garden, I would say it's a 7 out of 10. Now this tomato I've pruned to just one vine, but it's in a container instead of in a raised bed. So let's look at how well this one has done. On the bottom, I've got some good and early ripening fruit, but I actually haven't had very much going up. I do have some new flowers forming, but not very much in this section of the plant. And I'm not sure if that's because it's been in a container. I have been watering it, I think, well, and feeding it and all that good stuff, but not that much production. I think that for this big container, this plant is only going to give me somewhere between 5 and 10 tomatoes total. So, single vine in a container, my results are production only about a 5 out of 10, But as you can see, it's pretty healthy. My leaves are a little curled at the moment. Higher up, they're much happier. Health, 8 out of 10, 7, 8 out of 10. And for how easy it is, this is actually easier than in my raised bed garden. The reason being, I only have one plant to look at. It can't get tangled in with another plant, and I'm tying it to a fence post here as opposed to using just a string. So even if my pruning does go a little awry, if I have a sucker that gets a little far along, it's easy to just then tie it to the fence here and to flip around the way that I'm pruning. So this plant, which actually is just a sample of my single vine container plants that have all done about the same way, is easier than in the raised bed, but not doing quite so well. So what about pruning your tomatoes to 2 main vines? In this bed, I've planted a lot of plants, and each of them have 2 strings per plant. If you look down here on this one, 1, 2 from the same plant coming up on these 2 strings. Now, this is actually much more difficult than my single main stem. This makes me feel like I've got skills as a tomato gardener, but I'm not sure it's actually worth the extra effort. What makes this more difficult is that I've planted them too close together, first of all. So if I'd spread them out, that would certainly help. But it's also that they get tangled and they try and grow together and then cross one way, and I have to move them back to go the other way. And it's easy to kind of lose track. Where you started with 2 vines, all of a sudden you might have 3. Well, then what do you do? So, I mean, it's been fine. But looking at my production as well, I'm certainly not getting twice the number of tomatoes that we saw on my single stem plants in the back. And let's look at the sun gold. So we looked at my single stem sun gold. This one's 2, so you've got, and here's the tangle coming. So you've got this one coming up, which has 1 big cluster of fruit here, 1 here, and then I guess 1 there, but some flowers and things there. So it will make more, but really only 2 on the 1 stem. Contrast that to my single stem in the back and how many were on that. This one's doing better. I've harvested from the bottom here and from this one, and then that's a different plant over there, so ignore this one. Then we have this one here, so that's 3, 4, and flowers, and some little ones up there. So you're not getting twice the harvest. It's harder, not twice as hard, but harder than the single stem. I'm going to rank it as a 5 out of 10 for easiness, a 6 out of 10 for production, because I would expect more than what I've actually gotten. But in terms of health of the plants, they're not too bad. For the amount of effort I've put in, I'll rate it a 6 out of 10 as well. 1, 2, next let's look at 3. This is my sun gold tomato that is pruned to 3 vines by intention, if not by effect. So I started thinking that that's what I would have, and it's definitely exploded past that. But really what I've done is, as I've been pruning, letting some vines go, taking some out, I've been mindful of the airflow and the space and where I was going to connect the vines. And I actually think that this is done very well. Let's look at how productive this single plant in a container is doing with the tomatoes. So I've got this one here with some nice ripe ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I might be missing some. Let's say 13 plus the, 14. Yeah, 14 plus the flowers, branches of tomatoes on this plant. So by far, this is my most productive plant, and it's actually been a lot easier. I've been more intuitive with my pruning rather than holding myself to the rule of 1 stem, 2 stems. So I'm going to say this is a 8 or 9 out of 10 for easiness, a 10 out of 10 for production, And this plant looks really nice and healthy, so 9 or 10 out of 10 for that as well. I didn't stop here though. I even did some plants where, though they're indeterminate and we're told we need to prune, I did almost no pruning at all. So let's look and see how they did. This tomato bed is pruned so haphazardly, I bet you can't even tell that I pruned it at all. And I did, but I certainly wouldn't blame anyone from not being able to tell, myself included. So I put some tomatoes in this bed last minute because the seedlings I had in here before didn't thrive and were killed by roly-polies of all things. And I put up some string to trellis the tomatoes between these posts, almost like a modified Florida weave style trellis. I've been trying to pull up the vines to clip onto the string as they grow. This one accepted, and taking off extra vines where they seem to be growing in a not ideal spot where they're crossing, taking out some of the sun leaves that are growing inside so that I've got some good airflow in here, and the tomatoes, despite the fact these ones are a little thirsty at the moment, can be pretty healthy and pretty disease-free. So that's worked. These plants are healthy, the plants are healthy, but I have had a lot of energy going into the vines and going into the leaves, so my production is definitely down. On this one, you can see this whole vine going up. I've got 3 little tomatoes here, and then leaf, 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 sucker, some flowers. That's pretty representative of the whole bed of tomatoes here. So let's do our rankings. Health, I'm going to say 8 out of 10. Production, I'm going to say 5 out of 10. And ease of pruning, it's probably only a 6 or a 7 out of 10 because there's a lot of problem solving to this and a lot of decision making of, am I going to keep that one or not keep that one? It's not as nice and open as that plant where I started off intending to only have 3 vines. I let too many vines go on this one. So what happened with my tomato plants where I let basically every vine grow? These tomatoes, you may think, look very similar to the ones I just showed you, except these ones don't have any trellis at all. Not a stick, not a string, nothing. Now these tomatoes were volunteers. I didn't plant them, but when I saw them growing, I decided to just let them do their thing. And I'm probably getting away with it because they seem to be a cherry variety type, but I don't really know other than what I see forming here. It's probably so nice and healthy and doing so well without broken branches because it's a cherry variety. I have had similar sorts of setups with larger varieties of tomatoes in the past, and they have not done well. The plants have broken, they have been very mad at me for under trellising them. But in this case, it's doing quite well. So it's a 10 out of 10 for health. Like, look at these beautiful green leaves, even in the middle here where it's growing among the nasturtium and everything. It's doing great. Production, so many flowers, lots of flowers. Now I don't know how many plants are here. I think about 3, but for a cherry tomato, it's doing at least as well as my sun gold in the front for production. So I would say 9, 10 out of 10 for production. And in terms of how easy it is, this is dead easy. I came out and I pruned it really once in the whole season. So 10 out of 10 for that. Now, the last tomato that I'm going to show you is a very special tomato. It's one that's grown by my son, so let's go see how he's doing. This tomato is an example of negotiation trellising. So my son planted this lovely cherry variety of tomato. This is all one plant, and I suggested a trellis. So he agreed to a trellis, but then not to actually using the trellis. And little by little, we started using it, maybe pruning something. But essentially, this plant has gone wild like my untrellised cherry tomato, but is a little bit lifted off the ground because where we could see it was spreading out and about to attack the carrots, he allowed us to pick it up and attach it to this lovely sturdy trellis in the center here. And it is doing great. 10s all around. 10 for production for this wonderful single plant, 10 for health, and 10 for ease. Although negotiating with a 6-year-old, you know, maybe I should put that as a 2 out of 10 instead. But I think from now on, I'm going to take a page from his book and set a trellis there so that I can use it early in the season, and then really only use it when I see a problem happening for cherry variety tomatoes. So what's been the best? Well, it kind of depends on what I'm trying to do and what you're trying to do. If you want to grow a lot of tomatoes in a small space, I do recommend the single stem trellising. And I like using strings, but that's just me. I know lots of people like using the twisty things, or trellising to a fence or other things like that is really nice and easy too. But if you have the space, I think that letting more vines grow and not arbitrarily limiting that number to 2 or 3 has been what's given me the healthiest and the most productive plants this season. Now, the smaller the tomato, the less support it needs. That's why my cherry tomatoes have done well with little to no trellising. Bigger tomatoes are going to need more structure if you're letting multiple vines grow. And that could be something different than what I did as well. You could use the whole fence and trellis different parts, almost like an espalier. Or you could use an A-frame like I have in the back and let the tomatoes grow up and over and hang down in between. It can be really cool. If you have any neat tomato trellises that you've tried this year or another year, I'd really love to see them. Good luck with your tomatoes, and however your garden grows, keep growing as a gardener. And it's probably so nice and healthy. Ooh, ladybug. Love those in the garden. It's probably, this is an example, oops, of, darn it, of breaking off the poor little berries. Whoops, don't show them that.